Welcome to the ECE Classroom podcast with your host, SusieBeghin, inspiring early childhood educators every day. Welcome to the ECE Classroom, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of early childhood education, parenting tips, and creative learning strategies. I'm your host, SusieBeghin, and today we have a very special guest joining us, Will Maurer from Children's Media Research and Reform Lab. And he's going to talk to us all about screens today, a very popular topic. Welcome to the show, Will.
Thank you, Susie. I really appreciate it. It's great to be here.
Awesome. So I met you at a conference called the Bright Start Early Learning Conference, and you did a presentation there about children's media. And I was so intrigued by your presentation. I thought I need to have you on my podcast because my listeners, my educators, my parents need to hear the kind of messaging that you were kind of talking about at that conference. So hopefully you can share some of that wisdom with us today.
Absolutely. And I appreciate, the platform you have here to get that information out. So thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so tell me a little bit about you before we get started. Yeah, just you can tell me about your business, whatever you want to share with us.
Sure. Well, I know you have 3 daycare centers. So I started, my first job was working in a daycare center. My mom owned a daycare center, and I got to go over there while I was in high school, got out early and got to, enjoy the learning and helping in that field. It's been something I've been passionate about ever since. My career took a different journey. I was in media and entertainment for 20 years. My son was born in 2020, right at the start of the pandemic. And that's when I really went down the rabbit hole of when do we do screen time? What do we show? What's appropriate? What's not? And what I had learned turned into 5 years of research that I was not expecting because I came from that industry. I worked in children's media, development and production, and I was completely blindsided by the information that I was finding. And that led to more information and it snowballs from there. So I was fortunate to be in a position to do something about it. So that's what I did. I started the Children's Media Research and Reform Lab. Focus on the research, but more importantly, and as a parent myself, we focus on solutions and really covering that critical gap of the under 2 stage where the guidelines say no screen time, but the realities are the majority of children under 2 are watching screen time. So that's created a void. So that's been the key focus.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely relate to that. I work with a lot of parents. I work with a lot of educators. And yes, the guidelines do say no screen time under 2 years old, but I know the reality. I know the reality that many people actually are using screen time. And so let's get right into it. Like, what does the current research tell us about screen use for children under 2? Like, what should educators and parents know about this?
Yeah, so, a big problem is the high levels of stimulation that are being programmed into the shows. So research shows that when a young child is exposed to those high levels of stimulation, it triggers dopamine imbalances that affect the brain in a similar manner to drug addiction. So I call it a human's first addiction in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Those techniques precondition the mind to expect high levels of stimulation, which keeps a young child hooked and longing for more, because the truth is it's impossible for them to find that level of stimulation anywhere else. That leads to, I'm sure you've seen with the child watching television, symptoms of withdrawal, a decline in executive function, and lays the foundation for other addictions later in life. So, not too dissimilar from other addictions, there's those addictive behaviors attached to overstimulating screen media.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about, TV is definitely one type of media, but how do you feel about things like YouTube videos? Do you equate that all to be the same, whether you're on an iPad or watching it on a big screen? Does it really matter?
Well, YouTube has its own set of challenges. Anybody can create content, make any claims they want about that content, put it up on YouTube, and parents are always looking for their best for their children. And it's hard to do the research on everything. So, you look at the views, the number of views, and you're like, wow, this, a lot of people are watching this. It must be good. And really what's happening are the algorithms are kind of helping to boost those numbers. There's a lot of paid likes and views that are happening as well to boost the algorithms. So YouTube, and then obviously the algorithm itself with ads popping up and not knowing what the next show is going to play. A lot of them, even though they're labeled for children, a lot of them are inappropriate for children. So YouTube has its own set of challenges. Television, look, these are all for profit, right? And this is one of the biggest issues is you have to, in order to be in the business of children's media, you have to create a profit. So if somebody sets their standards very low and uses a lot of the harmful addictive techniques when creating these shows, it's harder for others to keep up with that, to make a living. So they resort to that, and some of the most trusted brands and IPs that we've grown up on and know you're starting to see them become more like a YouTube show as opposed to a developmentally appropriate original, Mr. Rogers or something or the original Sesame Street, where it's more slowed down and developmentally appropriate.
So, okay. So given that we know that people are going to use screens, what should educators or what should parents look for in terms of good quality content, and how do they determine, what kind of media their children should be exposed to and what to avoid?
The easiest answer for this is, if it mirrors reality, probably better. Now there's multiple factors at play here. One are production techniques, and I go in, coming from the world of entertainment and production, I go deep into production techniques, because what ends up happening is on the script or on the surface, there's great lessons. There's great, we're talking about friendship, collaboration, cooperation, diversity, but the visual and audio techniques used to deliver that message, the visual media, tends to have things flashing all over the place, right? Multiple points of interest where a child's unable to focus on what actually the message is. There's characters, language, and concepts that a young child can't comprehend mixed in there. Audio effects popping everywhere. And all these are designed to keep the attention focused, not on the lesson, but on the screen itself. And that's where screens can be used in a positive manner, but the content on the screen and the quality of that content is really what parents need to look for. So, the production techniques are something that are extremely important. So the slower, calmer the content is important, especially for younger viewers. So I always say, look for pro-social play-based activities that a child and a parent can replicate at home. And that is like a FaceTime or like an interview like this, finding content where someone is talking to you directly or to the child. And then making sure that content, what they're talking about, is appropriate, that a child is able to understand, comprehend, that it's slow, and the message is clear and concise.
I just, as you're talking, I'm thinking, and I was like, why did media go in this direction? Because I remember, when I was a child, the kinds of shows you would see would be real life people. Things like Sesame Street, Mr. Rogers, those two that you mentioned. Mr. Dress Up, for me, I remember that one was a really big one I loved. And it was just real life people talking and maybe acting out a skit or incorporating puppets somehow. But why did it change, or how has it changed?
Once the studios, the producers understood how to create that addictive loop, and there's been a lot of marketing research companies who study this, right? So they're informing the production companies, the studios, on how to create that, I'll call it an addiction, but more a viewer behavior where the viewer wants to engage. Or to a parent, it looks like the viewer is engaging. The viewer potentially is not engaging. But what ended up happening was quicker cuts. Baby Einstein's a good example. That was the golden seal for media, back when it was created. But when you look at it, it's rapid sequencing. There's no correlation between shots. A child's really not able to comprehend what's happening in those scenarios. when that happens and those addictions are created, it's harder. And you'll hear this all the time. My child won't watch Mr. Rogers. It's too slow. It's too boring. Once they get a Cocomelon or something with more rapid sequencing or frenetic action or big, bright, bold colors, and they're exposed to that at 4 or 5, 6 months old, they won't watch a Mr. Rod. They don't even want to be in reality, right? Reality is boring. Yeah. It's too slow. Not enough action. They're not getting the dopamine spikes that the screen media is giving them. So that's what's happening, what's happened, and what continues to happen is happening at a faster pace now. The amount of cuts, the amount of action, the amount of chaos, just throw everything in the kitchen sink into the bucket and throw it on the screen, or creating these, unboxing videos, things where there's a surprise, there's that hit of like, what is it, and satisfaction. This is all being studied and then being programmed and delivered to our children.
That is amazing. Like, that's amazing information that these fast-paced programs are basically reprogramming, I would say, children's brains, right? Like, it's programming them to think that everything needs to be that way, that it's hard to, function if things are not going at that pace, right? Like, I could watch it and be addicted for a minute, but then I walk away from it. Why do I want to go back to it, right? Like, what sends me back there? Right. And it's basically like it's reprogramming my attention.
To crave that, yeah.
Yeah, to crave, right? Yeah, like you said, the addiction. But, I think of, as an educator, I think about things like language development, right? What kind of programming would encourage language development? Or, sensory processing, what kinds of things would encourage that? So can you give me I don't want you to have to name off a whole bunch of shows, but can you name off some, good quality content? Like, what would be some examples? And then maybe on the flip side, I think you already mentioned one, but maybe some that should be avoided, like at all costs.
It's difficult to find good quality worth promoting, because my perspective is, if there are harmful ingredients, and I like what you said earlier, I liken junk food media to junk food, right? Bad media to junk food, because the ingredients in that media are not good for development, not good for a child. So to answer your question about what shows do I recommend, really I focus on the under threes, preschool and below. And there's not too much that I would recommend currently in that space. Everything either has a trailer on the front of it, which does the things you're not supposed to do. They have an intro video where it's just fast-paced, frenetic, and pretty much all shows have that. So why do we need that for a 3-year-old? You don't. It's just standard programming language that just continues without the thought being put behind it. And the other thing I think is, any media designed for a child under 3 should be designed for co-viewing. We know that parents aren't always going to co-view, but there should be that shared attention. And that's where screens can be used in a positive way to bring a parent and a child together in a way that puts a lesson in front of them and allows the parent to guide the narration, guide the learning directly with the child, because that's how a child under 3 learns best, is from a caregiver, from someone in the real environment. And then it should be designed to be able to shut off and continue that lesson or that experience or that play-based activity that they saw on the screen in the home or daycare center in the environment, right? This is a bridge that helps bridge the parent-child relationship, but also before, during, and after. And those are the shows that we're looking to work with studios, work with producers to help create, because they don't exist. So, that's the difficult
some good
thing.
Work, though. That's like some really good work that you're doing then, because if they don't exist, we definitely need them to exist, because screens are not going away, right? Technology is here. We're using it. We're using it every day, every minute. My phone is, it's inseparable to so many people. And somehow we need media to, like you said, to be able to work with adults and children together, right? The co-viewing that you mentioned, being able to start out on the screen but then finish in person is something that's definitely needed. Yeah, that's
Well, and
amazing work.
that's a predictive behavior too, right? So if a child knows, okay, the screen is a bridge, it's not a babysitter, it's a bridge. I'm going to turn it on for a little bit, and then after that we'll learn something and repeat it or play. That can have a positive impact. They're learning symbolic gestures, sign language. As I focus on the under twos, for me, it's communication, right? Because they're typically not able to communicate like we do yet. They're using
Mm-hmm.
symbolic gestures, facial expressions, body language. And that's what that media needs to incorporate. It needs to incorporate the language of the viewer. And what I found is that helps parents and caregivers understand their child's language better than expecting them to learn your language. It goes both ways. You need to
Right.
understand, what is my child trying to communicate to me? Or how can I help my child communicate in their language to me at the moment until they're ready to have a conversation?
Yeah. I can't help but think of Miss Rachel in this conversation, because a lot of people that I talk to, will say we watch Miss Rachel all the time, especially the under two, because like you said, it really does try to involve the parent and try to involve, them teaching language and how to teach the language, especially in that younger age category. So what do you think of something like that? Is that like on the way there? Is it not quite there? Would you recommend it to somebody? How would you deal with something like that? Because I do get a lot of questions about that, whether or
Yeah,
not that's appropriate.
this is another one of those great examples where what Miss Rachel is teaching and saying and doing is great. If that were you in a classroom doing that, great lesson, right? That's a great way. But with the audio and visual additions and some of the techniques that are used and some of the rapid scene changes and just jumping all over the place, that is not, a baby or a child under 2 or under 3 learns best from repetition, not from just an hour of continuous lessons. They're not going to process that.
Right.
Then there's all the visual effects that pop up, all the sound designs programmed in. And that part of Miss Rachel, I wouldn't recommend. But I think
Right.
her message, her, the way her knowledge of that space is important and
Mm-hmm.
needs to be shared. It could just be shared better on the
Right.
production
Yeah.
techniques.
And I totally agree with that, because I have always thought, there's something missing there. Like, it's just, parents can't just rely on that and say, oh yes, my child's going to learn language by watching Miss Rachel, or they learned all these new words by watching Miss Rachel. Yes, but there's also, like you said, negative aspects to it, right? Like, what else are they learning, right? Are they learning that everything needs to be fast paced? Are they learning that they can't wait for things? So
Right.
yeah, I agree that, not
Like
to
a
pick
good
on Miss Rachel. I'm sure there's many
No.
other programs like this, but
No,
this one is the most popular one out there right now.
Absolutely. And just like I was in media for 20 years, I had no idea a lot of this was happening in the background, right? I don't think it's intentional. It's just it's not beneficial for a child. A good example of a Miss Rachel will be doing a short episode, some words, some sign language, but repeating that over and over for 20 minutes in different capacities, working with the child, as you would in a classroom. That's a good example of single camera, locked off, not moving around, not jumping cuts. That is something a parent can put on and feel good about. And that's something a child has more capacity to learn, especially a younger child. When you're packing a year's worth or 6 months worth of learning into 20 minutes, it's just not feasible, and it's not helpful. The child's not processing most of that.
So what kind of guidance would you give then to educators who want to support these families out there around screen use at home, without shaming them? We all know that the guidelines say this, but we know what you're really doing. So how do you think we can support those families? What can we tell them?
Give them the guidance, right? The proper guidelines. There's so many experts out there right now who are saying, watch this or watch that. If you want good media, watch. But in all honesty, there's very little of that even the good stuff, even the IP that is classic, that is developmentally appropriate. So I think education is important, but then we being the collective, needs to create content because we know that screens are existing. The no screen time for the under twos isn't effective. It's actually more harmful because it defunds any government grants, any possibility to provide funding for better media for under twos, because the rule is you shouldn't be doing it anyways. So why would we fund this? It makes no sense. And then when you say you're creating media for a child under two, it's like you feel like a drug dealer. You feel like, am I part of the problem? Am I creating the stuff that they shouldn't be watching? But when you know the data, today's world, even I grew up on screen. I was a child in the 80s. Screens were on all the time. I mean, I grew up on screens. They inspired my career in the entertainment industry. So they're not going to go away. And I think we have to provide better media and better education on that media, not just settle for, well, these are the better shows, because if they're still developmentally harmful, their better doesn't matter, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I hate to say it, but I feel like the guidance should be to stay away from it. I mean, as much as possible to stay away from the screens until there is that media there that can be supportive. Because I think the harmful effects are worse.
Absolutely. No, it's no different than any other addiction, right? You don't, until you can fully understand it, it's not worth gambling on.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say. So we're just going to wrap up here. Is there any other messages you want to say to educators or parents in regards to this topic?
I think we covered a lot of it, but I think we all can use support as parents, right? It's hard. Screens are everywhere. So, don't be too hard on yourself, and really try to make if you're going to do it, try to make the best. Look for something that mirrors reality. Watch out for the deceptive production techniques, the rapid sequencing, the fast cuts, the crazy camera movements, frenetic action, disorienting visual effects and audio effects. All that is just programmed to capture attention and really is blocking any educational aspects from a show. And lastly, we have a lot of resources on our website, cmrrl.org. You could go there and look at it. I have a TEDx talk coming out next month on this, the whole systemic issue around screen time, which touches on the research around it, to the shame that and the guilt that parents feel, to what can we do? How do we fix this system? And my focus is on the under twos, but there's a lot of people doing great work across the sphere. So, less recommendations of content that still isn't great, and more, let's demand we fix this system. And that starts with, how do we fund this and take it out of a for-profit system and into a nonprofit system, which Fred Rogers did 50 years ago, right? With PBS
Yes.
Kids. So it is possible. We just have to, we have to focus on that as a solution.
That's amazing. I wish you so much success with that. I'll make sure that we have all of that information in the notes for this podcast. Thank you so much for being here today. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I really appreciate all of your wisdom on this very important topic.
Thank you. You as well.
All right. Hello and welcome back. It was great to speak with Will Maurer today about a very important topic, screen time. As we wrap up today's conversation, I want to leave you with this reminder. There's no place for shame in this conversation. As we mentioned during the podcast, we know that the Canadian Pediatric Society recommends no screen time for children 0 to 2 years old and minimal screen time for children from 2 to 6 years old. However, we know that the realities of today are that children are exposed to screens at a very young age. Screens are a part of our world today, and they're not going away. And for many families and educators, they're woven into daily life in ways that are sometimes necessary, sometimes helpful, and sometimes just reality. The goal isn't to eliminate screens completely or to find that magical, perfect program, because honestly, that doesn't exist. What does exist is intentionality. Asking questions like, is this developmentally appropriate? Is it supporting connection or replacing it? Is it balanced with real-world play, movement, and interaction? When we shift from guilt to curiosity, everything changes. We stop asking, what am I doing wrong? And start asking, how can I use this tool thoughtfully? So as you move forward, give yourself permission to let go of the pressure. Focus on balance and connection with the children and being present when it matters most. Because children aren't looking for perfection, they need responsive, caring adults who are willing to learn alongside them. And that, more than anything, is what makes the difference. I really encourage you to check out Will Maurer's website so that you can see what are the qualities of good media and support his initiative to make that good media available to children in a public way. Thanks for spending time with us today. Until next time, keep reflecting, keep learning, and keep showing up for the children in your care. Thanks for tuning in to the ECE Classroom with SusieBeghin. For more information, you can visit our website at www.SusieBeghin.com. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast so you can stay up to date on our latest episodes. Thanks for listening.